reality. Humbled really to address you all here, but I think that there may be, this may be the right moment to think about how we can propel the blockchain forward to reach consumers at an international scale. At this moment in time, it would seem particularly appropriate to bring blockchain to the next level. And that's what I wanted to address here. But first, the obligatory, I have to talk about all the old accomplishments and things briefly. They're somewhat relevant here. So, from the archives, I'd like to remind you that back in the early 80s, I created a thing called a mixed network, which was a way to give, in fact, a multi-party computation that was fully distributed, that protected user privacy in an unpermissioned manner. This paper was published in 79, actually, as a technical report, and then appeared in the Best Journal of Computer Science. Since then, it's been referenced more than 5,000 times, and there are many millions of people who use this technology, which I open sourced right at the beginning. I had also developed some other technologies around that time, which I did not open source, and truth is, they've not really seen the light of day, some of them. Others did. We'll come back to that. Also in the early 80s, I did something for the community. That was, I built up the International Association for Cryptologic Research. And this is an independent international organization that since then has been the main organization sponsoring scientific events in the field of cryptography, which is, of course, enabling the blockchain. And so, in fact, we have had 3 conferences every year. One in California, one in Europe, which moves around each year, and also one in Asia every year. And in addition to those 3 main conferences, we also have half a dozen workshops on an ad hoc schedule, and we publish the Journal of Cryptology, which is the major scientific journal in the field. And so building this up has created a very vibrant and fundamental community on which, let's say, the blockchain community is resting in part. And additionally, I would like to mention another open source, non-governmental, unpermissioned sort of project that was launched by myself because I felt there was a tremendous need to allow pure academic freedom and research in developing secret code techniques. Why am I saying that? Well, up until that point, governments have, graciously stepped in to organize the creation of encryption algorithm standards, and I felt it might be also a good thing that there were some more international efforts in this regard. And that was the right project that I got the European Union to fund for 5 years. And that's not an easy thing to do, as we heard a couple lectures ago. Because until recently, governments have felt that cryptography was really their own, their private domain. So this was an effort to open up research at a really practical international level. Okay, but this is not the stuff I'm really known for. What I guess I have to view as my main achievement, and people have been talking to me about it here at the conference. They still remember back in the 90s, I published this article in Scientific American, which essentially showed how one could organize all of the various consumer activities in informational space, that is payments, messaging, credentials, and so forth, in a way where it was not distributed, it was not decentralized. It was all done by major corporations and government in a centralized manner. However, each person was able to create their own keys and hold their own keys that would give them exclusive control over the privacy of their own transactions. So you could think of this as a hybrid approach. So I started with the unpermissioned, open technology that so like as I mentioned, for instance, with mixing, but then in the next decade, it became clear that consumers didn't really have the computing power to run all of cyberspace in a totally distributed manner. This required big data centers, and this was something that had to be left to major enterprises and government. However, it was possible with a small computing power held by the individuals to allow individuals to protect all of their own information from a privacy point of view without endangering the security of society at large. And that's what I showed the techniques for in this Scientific American article, which appeared in a lot of other fora as well. And interestingly, in order to then try to make this actually happen, I decided to dedicate, to interrupt my scientific career. If you go back to see, I was publishing a lot of interesting stuff, I think, and try to give this idea of personal privacy controlled by the individual a chance to actually take hold in the wild, to actually be used. And I did this, and it's only recently that I've admitted, really, the reason I did this was because I wanted to plant the meme, the idea in people's heads that they could protect their own information, that it was possible. And I hope that they would want to do it in an increasingly larger and varied set of applications. But initially, I targeted a very simple, focused, we say sometimes low-hanging fruit, the killer app, that is payments. That's pretty obvious. So I created the company DigiCash to take the kernel of the idea that was in the Scientific American article for the payments portion of the complete approach that was presented there, and just to focus on the payments portion and to build it and try to get it used in the real world. And I had some success with that. I created a currency called Cyberbucks and airdropped it, as we would say today, to anyone who would open a store on the then very early days of the World Wide Web, and they would then be rewarded by receiving 100 Cyberbucks. And if you see these, I don't know if I can point to anything, I don't have a pointer here, but you see all those icons there in the panel. Those are some of the logos for some of the original Cyberbucks shops. And if you go to my website, Chaum.com, and you look at the DigiCash project page, you will be able to hover over those icons and you'll see the home pages of those shops from the web archives if you're interested. And there's a lot of other press releases and other stuff up there as a kind of digital museum, and you'll see that many people don't realize that Deutsche Bank in those days was the largest bank in Europe by almost all measures, and they issued e-cash denominated in Deutschmarks. And that was a big development, a big project for us, and they had very rigorous, high standards for every aspect of the technology, and we successfully rolled that out with Deutsche Bank, and then also a number of other banks. So we had fiat currency, as it's now often referred to, US dollars were issued by Mark Twain Bank, and e-cash was issued in Australian dollars by Advance Bank, and we have licensees. You can see some of the logos there in a number of other countries, and so it was quite a reasonably good success. But these were very early days of the World Wide Web, and certainly pre-smartphone, and things are moving so rapidly, it's hard to imagine. There was no real electronic commerce in those days, so there's a lot of reasons that this isn't currently still used, but it's a very interesting technology that left the heavy lifting to the banks, but still allowed the users to protect their own privacy by virtue of keys that they created themselves on their own computers. Okay, well, so let's fast forward now to where we are today. And what I'd like to address is what I think is needed in order to take blockchain to the next level. The main chance for blockchain to go mainstream. And there are really four aspects, four things are needed strictly. The first three have to do with hard requirements that already exist because they are expected by users. So the user touch point surface is already formed, we cannot ask people to accept less than they already have with their smartphones. So people expect to be able to make payments with smartphones in like 10 seconds, from initiation of the payment to the consummation, the final, irrevocable finality of the payment being known to both parties. So that's something we'll have to be able to achieve to fulfill the Satoshi vision of making blockchain be a ubiquitous payment system. And another thing is, of course, that will mean that we have to be able to handle, let's say, hundreds of thousands of transactions per second as a maximum peak load, or ultimately even as an average load. And those things don't seem like they're really within reach at the moment. Even fundamentally, if you look at the underlying amount of cryptography that's done per transaction in current systems, under the current approaches that are used, it's not really possible to achieve these first 2 points in practice. I'm sorry to say. Something really fundamental is needed to take us to that kind of scale on a single server. And then there's the matter of privacy. That's what I've been talking to you about. You know, today consumers don't have a really high degree of privacy that they insist on. However, zero privacy is not an option. Consumers would not accept a really nice global payment system that could handle the capacity and had low latency if all of their transactions were, revealed in complete gory detail on a public blockchain. That's never going to happen. That would represent a tremendous diminution or reduction in privacy to zero. No consumer would want to experience that. So we need a way to provide some level of privacy, at least in payments, and perhaps in the so-called metadata of messaging. It's my belief that we cannot be too optimistic that consumers will accept a poor quality of privacy, but that's a national issue that I'm not really asking you to share my views on. I'd like to point out that technically, and this is often missed, there are really 2 issues in privacy of payments, right? There's the linking of the user, either by their IP address or their MAC address, to the transaction, and the other kind is the linking of transactions to transactions. And I would maintain that to have meaningful privacy, you need to solve both of those and provide unlinkability with many, many possible options. We say with large anonymity sets. It's not enough to be private among 3 or 5 possible users. You need to be private among sort of the class of all users that are making payments around that time, for instance, or all users. So that's quite a big challenge. No system today seems capable of addressing that issue. And then there's the 4th point. Now this does not have to do with the consumer touch surface, pardon me, but it has to do rather with the needs of society and governments at large. You know from history that consumer payment systems are often prime targets in the time of war. Because if you disrupt a consumer payment system, civilians can't buy food and fuel and so on. And this causes pandemonium and great suffering. So we cannot responsibly, in good faith, build out a global payment system that could be subject to the terminology sometimes used in high security government circles is subject to rapid, unanticipated modes of attack. Put more plainly, it can't be something that maybe some smart kid or hacker would find a clever algorithm for breaking. Or it also cannot be something that if some powerful group were to make some progress in some kind of quantum computing, that would give them the ability to steal all the money and take down the payment system, maybe selectively per country. This is unacceptable. So we need a system that, well, I'll just leave this slide up, I guess. We need a system that can satisfy all four of these requirements, and the first three being dictated by what consumers already have, and a little bit about what they might want in terms of privacy, and the fourth being what's absolutely necessary from a societal point of view. So if we could float a system that meets these requirements, I hope you can all agree that this could take the blockchain from where it is today to being a global platform that all kinds of very exciting dApps and facilities could ride on and use and interoperate under. This would just totally transform blockchain from something whose condition you can look up online at any moment to something that has a true global footprint on the global population. And at that point, the opportunities and the possibilities and the survivability of this whole ethos and dream can no longer be questioned. Thank you very much for